The city was alive with its usual rhythm, a mixture of hurried footsteps, honking horns, and flashing billboards selling dreams that only a few could afford. Amidst the towering glass buildings that sparkled under the afternoon sun, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. From it stepped a man whose very presence made people turn their heads. He wore a tailored suit that fit him with effortless precision, his wrist adorned with a watch worth more than most people's yearly salary. This was Alexander Crowe, a billionaire whose name was whispered with awe in boardrooms and social circles alike. For all his power and prestige, Alexander felt an emptiness gnaw at him. Wealth had bought him influence, loyalty, and admiration, but none of it ever felt real. People bowed to his money, not his humanity. That's why he had developed a peculiar habit over the years, testing people. He would extend small but significant gestures of trust to strangers, waiting to see if greed would consume them or if sincerity could still exist in a world obsessed with wealth. It was during one of his routine visits to the city streets that he saw her. She was standing outside a tiny cafe, wearing a faded apron and balancing 2 trays of coffee with remarkable care. Her hair was tied back messily, her shoes worn from countless shifts, but her eyes, bright and kind, held something rare. She didn't notice him at first, too focused on making sure the cups didn't spill, even apologizing gently to passers-by when they brushed against her in their rush. Alexander found himself lingering. He watched as she handed the coffee to a group of office workers, bowing her head politely even when one of them muttered a complaint. When she returned inside, he followed. The cafe was small, the kind of place that smelled of roasted beans and desperation. Behind the counter, she moved quickly, taking orders, cleaning tables, and even offering free cookies to children who couldn't afford a drink. It wasn't efficiency that caught his attention, it was the warmth. Even in exhaustion, she smiled. Even when shortchanged, she thanked the customer. When the crowd thinned, Alexander approached the counter. She looked up, startled by the sight of someone who clearly didn't belong in her world of chipped mugs and second-hand furniture. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but cautious. "A recommendation," he said, leaning slightly forward. "What would you say is the best thing here?" Her lips curved faintly. "The coffee's average. The muffins are better. But the best thing, probably that we won't rush you out if you sit here all day. Some people need a place to breathe." The answer struck him like a chord. Not a pitch for a product, not a forced compliment about the cafe, just honesty. He smiled faintly and ordered a muffin and black coffee. They exchanged a few words while she prepared his order, and with each sentence, Alexander became more intrigued. There was no trace of pretense in her, no attempt to flatter or impress. She was genuine, and it was precisely that quality he wanted to test. When she returned with his order, Alexander reached into his wallet and pulled out a sleek, matte black credit card. He placed it on the counter, and her eyes widened instantly. It wasn't just any card, it was one of those rare ones people whispered about, the kind with no spending limit, reserved for the world's wealthiest. "I'd like you to have this," he said evenly, sliding it toward her. She froze, her hands tightening around the tray. "Excuse me." "Take it," Alexander insisted, his voice calm but firm. "Use it however you want. Consider it an opportunity." Confusion, suspicion, and disbelief flickered across her face. "I don't understand. Why would you give me something like this? You don't even know me." "Maybe that's the point," he replied softly. His eyes held hers, searching for a reaction. Sometimes trust is given before it's earned. Her breath caught. For a moment, she considered pushing it back, afraid it was some kind of cruel trick. But something in his gaze, steady, unreadable, yet strangely sincere, kept her from refusing outright. With trembling fingers, she picked it up, still staring at him. "If I take this, I promise I'll use it wisely." Alexander leaned back in his chair, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on his lips. This was the moment he always waited for, the choice. Would she reveal herself to be like everyone else, blinded by the allure of wealth? Or would she prove that maybe, just maybe, selflessness still existed? As she tucked the card into her pocket, he felt the faint stirrings of anticipation. What she did next would tell him everything he needed to know. The next morning, the girl, whose name Alexander had learned was Emma, woke with the credit card still lying on her bedside table. She had placed it there the night before, staring at it as though it were a bomb waiting to go off. Every instinct told her this was dangerous, that people like her weren't meant to touch things like that. But then she thought of her mother's racking cough, her little brother's worn-out shoes, and the empty fridge in their tiny apartment. She couldn't ignore those realities. Her hands shook as she slid the card into her bag before heading out. The bus ride to the city center felt longer than usual, her heart pounding with every bump. What if it was a trick? What if the card didn't work and she was humiliated in front of strangers? What if the man came back later demanding something she couldn't give? Still, desperation was louder than fear. When she stepped into the glittering halls of the luxury mall, she instantly felt out of place. The polished marble floors gleamed under golden lights, and tall glass windows displayed handbags that cost more than her entire year's wages. Salespeople with sharp eyes and practiced smiles glanced at her clothes, faded jeans and a fraying sweater, and their expressions said everything: "You don't belong here." Emma's cheeks burned, but she pressed forward, clutching her bag tighter. She drifted past the boutiques, pausing for only a second in front of a shimmering evening gown. For a moment she imagined herself in it, beautiful, confident, respected. But then she shook her head. She hadn't come for herself. Inside a shoe store, she picked up a pair of sneakers for her brother. The clerk hesitated before approaching, as though doubting she could afford even the laces. Emma nervously handed over the black card. The machine beeped once and approved the purchase instantly. The clerk's eyes widened, his demeanor flipping from dismissive to deferential in an instant. Emma felt a strange surge of power. Though it wasn't hers, it belonged to the man who had given her the card. From there, she walked into a pharmacy and filled a basket with cough syrup, antibiotics, and vitamins her mother could never afford. She added bandages, ointments, and even nutritional supplements. She hesitated over the total, calculating in her head, but the thought of her mother sleeping without pain gave her courage to swipe the card again. Approved. Her next stop was a bookstore. She bought second-hand textbooks for her younger sister, notebooks, and even a small set of colored pencils. The cashier, an older woman, looked touched when Emma explained they were for a school project. Again, the card cleared without issue. Hours passed, and Emma moved through the mall with a quiet determination. She ignored the designer jewelry, the glittering watches, and the perfume counters where women spritzed scents worth hundreds of dollars. Each time temptation whispered, she silenced it with a single thought: this isn't for me. This is for them. Finally, while walking past a small home goods store, she stopped. In the display was a modest wooden photo album, its leather cover soft and simple, nothing like the flashy items around it. Emma stared at it for a long moment, her eyes stinging. Her family had so few pictures together, no framed portraits, no albums. Just scattered photos tucked into drawers, forgotten between bills and worries. She picked it up gently, as though it were fragile. Memories, she whispered to herself. That's what matters. She bought the album, clutching it to her chest like a treasure. It was the only thing she had chosen purely for herself, though even that was tied to her family. By the time the sun dipped low, Emma's arms were heavy with bags filled with groceries, medicine, and supplies. She boarded the bus again, ignoring the curious stares of passengers. She didn't feel rich. She didn't feel powerful. She only felt relief. Relief that tonight her family would eat well, that her brother would have shoes, that her mother might sleep without pain. As the bus rattled through the streets, she glanced at the black card once more, still safely tucked in her wallet. She hadn't come close to spending what it could allow. In fact, she had been careful, counting every purchase twice. Yet she couldn't shake the unease that lingered in her chest. She had no idea that somewhere across the city, Alexander was already waiting, curious and impatient, eager to learn how she had chosen to wield the power he had placed in her hands. The next evening, Emma returned to the little cafe for her shift, her body still aching from the weight of the shopping bags she had hauled the day before. She had already distributed everything to her family. Her brother's squeal of joy when he unwrapped his new sneakers still echoed in her ears, her sister's wide smile as she colored with the new pencils, and her mother's quiet tears of gratitude when Emma handed her the medicine. For the first time in months, Emma had felt like she was doing more than just surviving. She had given them hope. But now came the part she dreaded. She knew Alexander Crow would come back, A man like him wouldn't hand over something so valuable without expecting something in return. Every passing minute of her shift was colored with nervous anticipation. Sure enough, just as the evening rush died down, the door chimed and in he walked. The billionaire's presence filled the small cafe effortlessly. Customers who were leaving slowed their steps, whispering to one another as they recognized his face. He didn't look at them. His eyes, sharp and focused, found Emma immediately. She swallowed hard, her palms damp as she wiped them on her apron. When he approached the counter, she forced a smile. "Good evening, sir. Coffee again?" "Not tonight," Alexander replied smoothly. His gaze flicked to the empty tables in the back. "I think we need to talk." Emma nodded, her heart hammering as she removed her apron and followed him. They sat across from each other at a corner table. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So," he began at last, "how did you use it?" Emma hesitated. She could have lied, could have spun some story about buying nothing, about being too scared to touch it. But she remembered the sincerity in his eyes when he told her trust was given before it was earned. She owed him the truth. "I bought groceries," she said softly. "Medicine for my mother, shoes for my brother, school supplies for my sister." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small paper-wrapped package. "And this." She placed the package on the table and unwrapped it carefully, revealing the leather-bound photo album she had bought. Alexander's eyes lingered on it, his brow furrowing slightly. "A photo album." His voice was steady, but there was a faint tremor beneath the words. Emma nodded, her fingers brushing the smooth cover. "We don't have much in the way of memories. Just a few old photos stuffed in drawers. I thought, maybe if I got this, we could keep them together. Something to remind us of what we do have, even when times are hard." For a long moment, Alexander didn't speak. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the simple object between them. It wasn't the groceries, or the shoes, or the medicine that unsettled him, it was that album. A flood of memories rose unbidden, memories of his own childhood home. Once, his family had laughed together over dinner, taken trips to the park, snapped silly pictures. But after his father's death and his relentless pursuit of success, he had drifted away from them. Birthdays missed, holidays skipped, calls unanswered. The last time he had seen his mother, she had tried to hand him a photo of their family at the beach. He had brushed it off, too busy for sentiment. Now, staring at Emma's modest purchase, the weight of that neglect crashed over him. "You didn't buy anything for yourself?" he asked quietly, his voice rougher now. Emma shook her head. "It didn't feel right. My family needed things more than I did." She paused, her eyes searching his face. "I hope I didn't misuse your trust." Alexander swallowed hard, but the lump in his throat made it difficult to speak. "No," he said finally, his voice low. "You didn't misuse it at all." Emma looked relieved, her shoulders sagging as if a burden had lifted. She began to wrap the album again, but Alexander reached out, his hand brushing against hers to stop her. His touch was gentle, hesitant. "Keep it out," he murmured. His gaze softened in a way she hadn't expected. "That album, it means more than you realize." She tilted her head, confused by the sudden emotion flickering across his face, but she didn't press him. Instead, she gave a small smile and said, "Thank you for trusting me." Alexander leaned back, his thoughts spiraling. He had set out to expose greed, to confirm the cynicism he carried about the world. Instead, this girl had held up a mirror to everything he had lost in his pursuit of wealth. Her choices didn't just surprise him, they cut into him, exposing a loneliness he had buried under boardrooms and bank accounts. And for the first time in years, Alexander Crow felt something he couldn't quite control: heartbreak. The cafe had emptied out by the time their conversation ended, leaving only the low hum of the ceiling fan and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Alexander sat silently, his hand still resting near the photo album, as if touching it anchored him to something he hadn't realized he was missing. Emma sat across from him, her eyes uncertain but steady, waiting for his next words. He finally exhaled, a long, heavy breath that seemed to carry years of unspoken weight. "You broke my heart," he said quietly. Emma blinked, startled. I don't understand." You could have spent thousands on anything you wanted, he continued, his voice rawer than before. Diamonds, dresses, vacations. Instead, you bought medicine, shoes, pencils, and a photo album. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, and she saw something there she hadn't expected: pain. Do you know what I realized when I saw that album? That I don't even have one. Not a single book filled with pictures of my family. Because I've spent years chasing money instead of memories. Emma's chest tightened at his words. She hadn't meant to wound him. She had only done what felt natural, what any daughter and sister would do for her family. I'm sorry, she whispered, though her voice trembled. I didn't mean to hurt you. Alexander shook his head. No, don't apologize. You didn't hurt me, Emma. You reminded me of everything I've lost. His gaze grew distant, as though he were seeing not the cafe walls but his past. Empty boardrooms late at night, missed calls flashing on his phone, a mother's disappointed smile fading into silence. Emma hesitated, unsure if she should speak, but then she said softly, "It's never too late, you know. To make new memories." The words slipped between the cracks of his defenses, settling somewhere deep. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "You're remarkable," he said. "Do you know that? Most people see this card." He tapped the black credit card lying between them, and their eyes light up with greed. "But you saw your family. You saw love. That broke something in me. In the best and worst way." Emma lowered her gaze, cheeks warming. "I just did what felt right. And that," Alexander said firmly, "is why I can't just leave things as they are." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Sliding it across the table, he waited as Emma looked at it, confused. "What is this?" she asked. "An agreement," Alexander explained. "I've set up a trust fund for your family, enough to cover your mother's medical treatments, your siblings' education, even rent for a safer apartment. No strings attached." Emma's eyes widened, and she immediately shook her head. "I can't accept that. It's too much. You've already done enough." "This isn't charity," Alexander interrupted gently. "It's gratitude. For reminding me that money isn't the point of living. For showing me what selflessness looks like." His voice wavered slightly. "You gave me something I haven't felt in years, hope. And I don't know how else to repay that." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, her throat tight with emotion. She pressed her hands against the document, trembling. "You don't have to repay me. I never wanted anything from you." "I know," Alexander said softly. "That's exactly why I want to do this." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Emma wiped at her tears quickly, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. But Alexander didn't look away. If anything, he seemed more grounded, more human, than the untouchable billionaire she had first met. After a moment, he stood and extended his hand. "Come on, let's walk. I want to see the city through your eyes, not mine." Emma hesitated before slipping her hand into his. His grip was warm, steady. As they stepped out of the cafe into the cool night air, the city lights shimmered around them, but for once Alexander wasn't thinking about deals or profits. He was thinking about a girl who had chosen love over luxury, and about the pieces of himself he might still be able to reclaim. They walked in silence at first, the rhythm of their steps falling into sync. Then, quietly, Emma said, "You know, it's not too late to start your own album." Alexander's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Maybe this will be the first page," he murmured, glancing at her. And though neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, in that moment Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, not the weight of his fortune, but the lightness of being truly seen.